In the previous video, we already demonstrated that how fast Japan grows after the World War II. And Japan is actually the first country in our modern history with literally double-digit growth rate for more than a decade. Okay, and so we definitely want to know, how could this happen in Japan? And of course, is it possible for other developing countries in our world to copy what Japan has done? Okay. So, of course, upon this moment, you would probably recall, what we did back in chapter 1. Okay, we could use the PPF analysis, production possibility frontier model, okay, to explain Japan's catching up growth. You could say that right after World War II, because a lot of machinery equipments and even labor force were destroyed because of the war or during the war. So Japan stays far below its potential. Okay, in 1950s and 60s, the economic growth in Japan was primarily, moving from far below the potential to a place, closer to its potential. Okay? In other words, a movement within the PPF. Okay. However, that's a quantitative analysis. It doesn't really help us quantitatively to understand, the contributions of different sources, okay, of economic growth. So here, in terms of the sources, we said that we have at least four factors of production. They are land, labor, capital, and technology. Okay, and with more data available, we certainly want to know how much each factor contributes to growth. Okay, in other words, for example, if this year the annual growth rate of the U.S. GDP is 10%, then we want to know, how many of these 10 percentage points come from technological innovation, how many comes from capital, how many from labor or land, right? We want to break it down and take a deeper look at, the sources of economic growth. And to be able to do that, we definitely need to conduct regression analysis. Okay? I knew that some of you have a strong quantitative or statistical background, so you have probably been exposed to regression analysis in different courses. Okay? However, some of you probably had no chance to explore or learn regression analysis before. So here I'm just going to assume that you all have no prior knowledge about regression analysis. Okay, and then we're going to have a very brief introduction to this regression analysis. Okay. Of course, we won't have the chance to look at all the mathematical or statistical details. However, we would, our discussion would focus upon the application, how we're going to apply the regression analysis to this very specific case, okay, to explain Japan's post-war economic miracle. Okay? Now, in the worksheet number 7, you should be able to find two questions. The first two, number 1, number 2. We give you, a real-world example at the micro level. So we ask you to figure out, students' GPA. What are the determinants, okay, of the GPA or academic performance? Okay, and again, you can just use your common sense and come up with a model. And later we're gonna discuss it during our meeting. Okay, and Now, once we understand that GPA example, then we can go from that to the production behaviors. Okay, and when we look at the individual level, once again, we would like to use what's called Cobb-Douglas production function. Again, if you already took 295, or 294, you should have a pretty good understanding of it. If you do not have that, um, the background, then again, I would strongly encourage you to Google it. Okay, it should be quite easy to understand. And during our class meeting, we will also, I would also offer some quick ways to help you refresh your memory. Okay, especially about the mathematical expression. Okay, I want you guys to, um, to get prepared before our discussion. Okay, like what is it? Okay, and what does it mean? Like there are some variables, some constants in that function. What exactly each of these means? Okay, and as I said, we're gonna discuss that during our meeting. And what matters here to us to understand Japan's economic miracle is to empirically test or estimate the contribution made by each factor. Okay, as we said, capital, labor, land, and technology. Okay, and so the last two questions in the worksheet, you will have a chance to again to come up with your own methods, and then we're going to discuss how that can be tested empirically. Okay? In other words, with the real world data about Japan. Okay, and so here, let's just go ahead and talk about the empirical results. Okay, and what we already learned from the real world data. Okay, about the sources of growth or the contribution of these factors of production to the overall growth. Okay. All right. So here we break down the post-war period, specifically from 1960 all the way to 2001, okay, over the course of 4 decades, and we look at, during the specific periods, how fast Japan's economy grew, and the breakdown of its growth. Okay, so again, from 1960 to 1973, over the course of 14 years, Japan's economy grew at the annual growth rate of 9.7%. Once again, very close to double digit, right? And when we break it down, we find that 6.2 percentage points are actually from technological or technology progress. Okay, and only 3.5 percentage points were contributed by labor and capital combined. Okay, and that simply means technological progress played the most important role in the post-war economic miracle of Japan. Okay, and what's more interesting is when we look at, for example, 1975 to 85. Here, Japan's economy slowed down very significantly. Okay, because of multiple things, including the two oil crises in 1970. Which significantly rose the fuel cost. Okay, so it was extremely challenging for an industrial economy like Japan to maintain the high growth rate. Okay, and also in 1980s, Japanese economic growth was heavily affected by the what's called the Plaza Accord, which we will discuss later. It's an international agreement signed by Japan, U.S., and several other countries. Okay, about their trade in the currencies. Okay, and So as you could say, like in 1980s, 1990s, Japan's economy slowed down very quickly from nearly 10% per year to less than 2% per year. Okay? And during this slowdown process, we find that uh, the technological progress also slowed down. Okay, if you look at it from 1990 to 1995, you find that the technological progress actually contributed minus zero point 0.3 percentage points. In other words, it did not make any positive contribution. Okay? It actually hold the economic growth back. Okay? Although the degree is very small, but again, it's very amazing that technological innovation slows down when the overall economy does the same. Okay, and so this is the first piece of empirical evidence. The second one, we're going to make a comparison between Japan and the U.S. Okay, and on this one, when we look at the Japan, we specifically look at from 53 to 71, because that's the high growth period. And when we look at U.S., we look at from 1984 to 69. Again, that's the high growth period for the U.S. So for Japan, during that period, the average growth rate per year is 8.81%, versus 4% in the United States. Okay, now we break this down by by their contributions to overall growth. Okay, we look at labor, capital, and technological progress, and the residuals. Here, residuals means something that cannot be explained by labor and capital, okay, and technological progress. Okay, you could say this is an unknown factor. Okay, or this is what we call the total factor productivity (TFP). Okay, all right, and you don't really have to look at these subcomponents, within each factor. Let's just focus upon these three factors here. Now, first of all, Japan, for its 8.81% annual growth rate, about 4.86 percentage points come from technological innovation. So this accounts for more than 55% of the overall growth. And for the same factor here in the United States, technological progress contributes 1.91 percentage points of overall growth, which is about 48% of the overall growth. Okay, so as you could say, the technological innovation is even more important for Japanese economic growth than for the U.S. Okay, now we can also take a look at labor, okay, which contributed 1.85 percentage points, or 21%, versus 32.5% in the U.S. In other words, the labor contribute relatively less to Japan's growth than it does for the U.S. growth. And for the capital stock, again, that means machinery, equipment, tools, okay, not the financial capital. It accounts for about 24% of the overall growth in Japan, but only 20% in the United States. So here, what we learn is capital and labor also play crucial roles in the post-war economic miracle of Japan. Okay, and between these two, we find the capital stock is a little more important, okay, than labor. Okay, and so here we already break down the economic growth or its sources during the post-war for Japan, And then in the next video, we're going to look at the saving rate in Japan and how it contributes the